Hello listeners, this is Stu Jackson here, one of your hosts from Aliens Explored. I just wanted to have a quick word with you before we get into the nitty-gritty of today's episode, which is really interesting. Loved recording it with Neil. But before I do so, I just wanted to talk to you. We make mention of next week's very, very special live event that we're going to be streaming an episode live all about the information release that's coming up as a part of this COVID bill. We talked about it on the show. What we don't mention is where you can actually see this. Now, we're going to be on Twitch, so it's twitch.tv. If you're not familiar with it, it's a live streaming site. So you shouldn't have to create an account in order to watch it. But if you want to comment in the comments on Twitch, then which we really want you to do, we want people to engage with what we're doing. So yeah, if you want to comment live on the show, what you'll need to do is set up an account ahead of time. So like I say, it's twitch.tv. The particular channel is my own channel, where I do a lot of Star Trek streams. So if you're interested in Star Trek, you'll be interested in that. But my stream is at twitch.tv/Stooge_action. Now, I am going to put a link to this in the description, but I'll spell it out for you just in case. That's twitch.tv/STOOGE_ACTION. Stooge Action. It's kind of a play on my name, Stu Jackson, Stooge Action. I think I'm such a wit sometimes. But there we go. So go to twitch.tv/_Stooge Action. Make sure you've got an account. Sign up, subscribe, hit the notifications button so that you'll get notified when I go live, when Neil and I go live in particular next week. That's next Friday at 4 p.m. If you're listening to this way off into the future, there'll be a link to it on my YouTube channel as well. But we'll talk about all that on the actual stream next week. So in the meantime, enjoy this week's episode. Aliens Explored is a podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective, whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
Ex-US Navy pilot Lieutenant Ryan Graves recently gave a talk on the TV show 60 Minutes, talking quite openly about UFOs that he had witnessed during his career. But this is just the tip of the iceberg of all the information coming out recently from the Pentagon and other government sources about UFOs. Join myself and Neil here on Aliens Explored as we discuss and disseminate why it is that the government is suddenly releasing so much information about UFOs.
Hello listeners and welcome back to Aliens Explored, your weekly look at all things unexplained in our skies, in our seas, under our ground, in deep caverns, and that's all stuff that's come from somewhere else. I'm one of your hosts, Neil Kelly.
And I'm your other host, Stu Jackson.
Sorry, I temporarily forgot my name there. And now, before we get into today's episode, we have a little announcement regarding the next episode, which will be our 50th episode.
It will be. Now, it's not so much the fact it's our 50th episode that's the... I mean, that's quite an achievement.
It's quite an achievement. We've been going for a year.
Yeah, almost. Almost hitting that 1 year mark. And actually, we've got something very, very special planned for our 1 year anniversary episode. But that's not really what we want to talk about, because next week, our listeners will cast their minds back to when Donald Trump signed the COVID relief bill for the pandemic to release a lot of money. He put in this odd clause about releasing information from the Pentagon about UFOs.
Now, did Donald Trump put this clause in? Because it's the $2.3 trillion appropriations bill to provide the coronavirus relief, much needed by Americans.
Yes,
it's an enormous document that runs to more than 5,500 pages.
I'm going to stop you there.
Who knows
I was
what's in
saying
there?
it as a real just shorthand. Remember that moment.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Next week we'll be going into it in a great amount of detail, because that's when all this information is. We hope. Now, to be fair, we are recording this. We're at the back end of May when we're recording this. So when we say next week, it's next week to you from the release of this episode.
Yeah.
Because that information hopefully is going to be released by the Pentagon. It's required to be released. It was 180 days. So what we're doing is something very, very, very special for you listeners. On the 25th of June at 4 p.m. UK time, which is 10 a.m. Central Time, you can work out from either of those what time it is where you live, but we are going to be going live over on Twitch with a very special episode discussing all the information that we hope has been released. Now, it might be a discussion about why it's not been released.
Yes.
we have
to allow for that possibility, don't we?
Absolutely. But no matter what, because it coincides with the release of information that's supposed to happen, we will be doing a special live stream as an episode. Like I said, this will be 4 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m. Central Time on the 25th of June. Now, if you go into the description of this episode, you will see a link to the Twitch account where you can watch it. So get on that now. Pause this episode. Make sure that you add that Twitch account to your regular ones to get announcements to go live, and stick this date in your calendar. We will, of course, then turn it into an audio podcast to release on the website as we normally do. But we want your involvement. We want to talk to you in the chat on Twitch. We want to hear your thoughts on what we're saying. We want to interact with you. So help us make this happen. Help us make it a very, very special event. Right. Got it all out now. Feel better.
It will be lovely to interact. I mean, we have so many listeners now. I saw a statistic. We're in the top 25% of all podcasts.
It's awesome, isn't it? Absolutely
it really
incredible.
is
I'm
awesome.
blown away by the viewing or listening, should I say, numbers. Absolutely incredible, and it's all down to you, listeners. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you.
So let's get on to this week's episode then, which we're going to talk about a specific event that's happened recently, but more generally we want to talk about all the stuff that's been coming out lately in totally unprecedented way. But as part of it, this specific event, you've got Lieutenant Ryan Graves, haven't you, Neil?
Yes, we have got Lieutenant Ryan Graves, who went on a...
I mean, we haven't got him on the show, but...
No, that would be nice. That would be nice.
It would. Tweet us, Ryan. We'll invite you on as a guest. Yeah. So Lieutenant Graves is an ex-pilot for the U.S. Navy. Did you see this when it came out in the news, Neil?
I did. When they showed the clips of the UFO or the unidentified aerial phenomena sighting taken on from the aircraft's cameras. Yes,
I think we're talking about two different things here, because Lieutenant Graves went on to 60 Minutes in America.
On CBS, yes.
Yeah, and he talked about basically having witnessed UFO events every day for years and years. And the host, Bill Whittaker, cut his. Wait a minute, every day for a couple of years, and he said, "Yeah, all of us did." Well, yeah,
it wasn't just him. To him, it was just an everyday, regular occurrence.
He was very matter of fact about it, wasn't he? And that's
pretty much bored by it.
Normalised.
Not this again. Yeah, normalised. Yeah.
Yeah. And that must be a lot of... Because if you and I saw a UFO in that sort of circumstance, it'd be a big deal. Of course it'd be a big deal. So to become normalised, that is significant, isn't it? So what do you make of Lieutenant Graves?
Well, pilots tend to be people who aren't prone to flights of fancy. They are selected for their... I don't mean to insult pilots, but it's a job that really is not suitable for someone with an imagination.
Yes. Certainly an active imagination.
Yes.
You definitely don't want creative people getting creative when they're behind.
Or imagining things or whatever.
Do you think, and this is pure speculation, spitballing on my part, but do you think that if that's the case, if he's got an imagination deficit to the likes of you, we're both very creative types, we're both actors and what have you.
We are artists.
We are indeed. So, by comparison, I think it would be fair to say yes, that Lieutenant Graves probably has an imagination deficit in comparison. Do you think that has led to his being nonchalant about these UFOs then?
No, I think what's led to him being nonchalant is the fact that he's just, as you say, normalised that. I imagine the first time he saw one, he thought, "Oh, what's that?" I can only speculate, but I imagine he didn't think, "Oh, it's visitors from another world, visitors from another dimension." He probably just thought, "Oh, what's that? I'll report it. I saw something." If you're a Navy pilot or any kind of military type pilot, especially if you're on active duty somewhere, and you're in skies that might be hostile, are hostile or could well turn hostile very suddenly, you'll be very alert to suddenly seeing something you've never seen before, because there's a fair chance it's going to be a new kind of weapon that's been deployed against you, and that the thing has been sent up to kill you. That's probably what a military pilot would be trained to think. But also, their aircraft itself will be programmed to respond to any kind of threat.
Well, yes, I know you've mentioned this on previous episodes about sort of laser guided stuff that's going off automatically, and so here he is, a kind of sensible. I think that's probably a much more flattering way of putting it. He's sensible. He's no nonsense. He's just doing his duty, and he's come forward and he's talking about these hundreds and hundreds of events that he's just become normalised to. Now, this plays into the wider thing that I want us to talk about today, which is if this had happened 20, 30 years ago, If this had happened 5 years ago, God, if this had happened a couple of years ago, it would be, I mean, for one thing, it would be massive, unprecedented news.
Why isn't it now?
Well, because there is so much information coming out at the moment. We had that one where we discussed quite a few episodes ago now about the 3 videos that had been released by the Pentagon, where they've said yes, these are UFOs. You remember the tic-tac-toe?
Yeah.
Tic-tac or pill-shaped UFO flying over the sea, all released by the Pentagon, verified by the Pentagon, and yes, these are happening. So you've got official UFO encounters. They're not coming out and saying it's aliens, of course they're not, but they're being very open about stuff, particularly video footage. I mean, just before Ryan Graves gave his account, you had footage from the USS Omaha with a circular video footage of a circular UFO coming down from the sky, buzzing them a little bit, and then it seems like it either blinked out of existence or it disappeared straight into the sea. It was getting quite close to them. But all this is coming out, and it's open, and it's official. And what is happening?
But it's the speed of it. It's a complete volte-face, isn't it? That a complete change around, that they've gone from saying, no, there's no such thing as extraterrestrials, we've had no contact with them, and anyone who says we have is probably a mental patient or should be a mental patient, but then suddenly saying, oh yes, you know, we're quite used to them. We've been seeing them for years, but there was no kind of in between, no kind of stages. It's just this sudden switch. No sort of, well, you know, it might be possible, and yes, we have seen some things that can't be explained, and you know, and here's some footage. It's not. It's just suddenly boom.
Well, so I'm going to say I don't believe it's that sudden. I think there has been a sizable shift quite recently. But do you remember back to our Halloween episode last year? And we talked about Hollywood, and we talked about... I put forward this theory that we as a society, as a culture, are being prepared for announcements, being prepared, being conditioned to accept UFOs, extraterrestrials, but being normalised to it. It's that word normalised again. That we're being conditioned to accept it. I think, you know, you look back at that, I mean, it sounds like a wild theory, or certainly it sounded like a wild theory back then. You look at all this stuff coming out from the Pentagon now, it suddenly doesn't sound quite so wild, does it?
No, and perhaps in times, perhaps what's happened recently is that, you know, contact has been made. We've established a relationship with these beings based on trust. So now we can tell the public, we have met people from other worlds, and they're perfectly friendly, and we're going to do this deal with them, or whatever. Whereas in years past, they might have been saying, well, yes, we have got evidence there are beings from other planets with advanced technology to ours, and we don't know what their intention is, but have you seen War of the Worlds?
Well, it was only...
or Independence Day.
It was only a couple of episodes ago that we discussed Phil Schneider. Now, back, of course, in the 90s, if you are to believe the stories about him, he was killed for going public. I can't imagine. I think if someone went public like that now, I don't think it would elicit that response from a government. I think it would just be... I think they'll probably be fairly silent about it. They're not saying extraterrestrials are here. They are saying there are lots of UFOs out there and we don't know what they are. And they're being very candid about that.
The thing is, I mean, the US government, or any government, is a big thing. and it's full of all sorts of, full of thousands of people, all with different agendas, and it could very well be that half the time one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. One department is creating legislation which is absolutely polar opposite of something being done somewhere else for a different reason, but will actually it render it totally unworkable. So you can imagine, that a certain group within the US government has come to the ascendancy. There's suddenly their voice has been heard, but there could still be these people in the background who say, if a Phil Schneider crops up, we need to suicide him before he can spread the word too far. It's governments are just too big and unwieldy to have a common purpose.
Well, you've got you've got different measures being taken. I know in Phil Schneider's case, a number of his friends were allegedly committed suicide and under questionable circumstances. Then you've got the Bob Lazars of this world who are just utterly discredited, and it seems to be a different technique being used. I wonder if if someone came forward with something like Phil Schneider's story today, let's assume they do not have categorical physical evidence of what they're talking about, because that I think will be a bit of a game changer. I think it'd be a game changer on so many different things, but that's not really what I'm talking about. But I think, if someone just coming forward with this story, I think the governments would just let them.
But say it's not a government. It depends on who's in charge of that particular department at that time. You could have someone in the department right now who says, "Well, actually, we don't care. Let him say whatever he wants. We'll just ignore it." He could retire tomorrow, or she could retire tomorrow, and be replaced by someone who says, "Oh no, this person needs to be silenced, or this person needs to be discredited." It really, I think it really, a lot of what happens in government depends on who's in charge of the department at any given time.
So am I understanding you correctly that is what you're saying, that we're now starting to see all this information coming out from the Pentagon, from the likes of Lieutenant Graves, and not being challenged, not being countermanded? Not being discredited because it's simply a more liberal person in government in charge of that department?
Yeah, I don't think Lieutenant Graves has just decided off his own back to go public. I think he's probably been told to. This is the story. You can talk about this. If you want to earn a little bit of extra cash in your retirement, you can go on CBS 60 Minutes and you can talk about this episode. Or actually, we want you to be our spokesperson to talk about this issue within these very limited parameters. We want you to just say, for a normal thing, we saw these things all the time.
Here's what you can say, here's what you can't say.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a different thing than to what you're talking about as, it depends who's in charge of the department. That's a conscious effort to get information out into the public domain.
Yeah.
Which is, coincidentally, that is what I think is happening. I think this is a deliberate step up.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that there could have been previously someone in post who said, no, this stuff must never come out, the public will panic, blah, blah, blah. And then they retire. And someone else comes along and says, actually, we should release this. We should get this out there. And we've got, Lieutenant Graves is coming up for retirement. You've seen plenty of these things. You can go on 60 Minutes and talk about them, but don't mention this, that, or the other. But, go there. And then they could retire and be replaced by another hardliner who says, no, absolute crackdown. We're going to deny it. We're going to come up with an explanation. Or we're just going to discredit anyone who talks about it.
Now, I'm going to...
I think
I'm going to ask you. I'm going to back you into a corner now.
Okay.
Just to prepare.
Stand me in front of a metaphorical open grave.
Yeah, standard issue on this show. But no. So I'll use this term very, very loosely because I know we're both keep as open mind as possible. But as our resident naysayer, all this stuff coming out, and like I said, they're very conscious not to say, "Oh, it's extraterrestrial" or anything like that, but they're also not saying it isn't.
No,
which I think is quite.
As I say, UFO
or
unidentified aerial phenomena, as they like to call it, because that's the military for you. They won't pick up a common. No, we need our own three-letter acronym. We're going to call. Everyone says UFOs. We're going to say UAPs because we have a different. We have a different perspective, and we have inside knowledge that they don't have. I mean, it was Texas Senator Marco Rubio who said that he was perfectly happy with these if these UAPs are actually just beings from another world passing by or coming to have a look. He would be more worried if it was someone like China or Russia who have superior technology that we can't match. That they've got aircraft we can't shoot down that can fly over our airspace with impunity. They'll beat us hands down in any conflict. That's what he's more worried about. A terrestrial source.
From the release of these videos, that hasn't been ruled out either. Which, again, is in of itself kind of an important thing to remember in this. It is just the raw information that is being put out into the public domain. So coming back to my question then, so as our resident naysayer, all this information is suddenly kind of it's ramped up, it's stepped up, and we'll come on to the whys and wherefores, what whys we think that is in a moment. But has it made you think, well, actually no, it must all be true, there must be something going on?
In a sense, yeah, I do want to believe it. I do want to think that we're being visited by that suddenly the grown-ups have turned up to run our planet for us. Because we've certainly shown hopeless incompetence. We just seem to be getting worse and worse and worse in the way we're running things. So
there's that
hope. But I suppose I am also affected by, you might say it's governments running discreditation schemes that, I don't want to appear as a raving nutcase. And that's the thing. As soon as you start saying, watch the skies, there's UFOs up there, well, you're saying you might not be mad yourself, but you're saying the same things that mad people say. So, you get lumped in with them. So there's that. I'd be careful what I said and who I said it to, if my opinion on what I think is up in the sky.
Well, it's fortunate you're only saying it to me and not to public
thousands,
podcast.
No, not to thousands of listeners. I probably wouldn't say it in a job interview.
No. No, although I've talked about this podcast when I've auditioned for roles. I don't care. I really don't care what people think of me in that regard. Okay, well, I mean, no, and thank you for sort of bearing with me on that question. I was just really curious to hear how it had swayed your view. Now, I mean, we're approaching sort of the end of this show. This episode, and before we do get into our summary, though, ultimately, just want to touch on why we think, and I know you touched on this a little bit earlier as to why, and I mentioned about the conditioning, but we have from the time of release of this episode. Like I said right at the very beginning, in a week's time, you've got this official release of information coming from the Pentagon. And I wonder if there is a connection between the ramp up of release of information, which has happened since that COVID bill was signed. That's from then is basically when we've seen this acceleration and this blasé, oh yes, we know there's UFOs. from that point is when we've seen the acceleration. Now, I wonder if that's part of the preparation in society. Is they know that there's going to be, if you like, damning information coming out, and they're just doing their best to prepare society for it in the meantime.
Well, when these videos were first released, Donald Trump was president of the United States, and he was very excited about Space Force. He was going to spend billions of dollars on it, creating this new wing of the military, although there was every suggestion this was to do with just being able to attack targets on Earth from a higher altitude, really. But also, he also talked. There was some talk about the Galactic Command that he's been in contact with, and
that's Hayam Eshed who said this about Donald Trump. It's not Donald Trump himself who said it.
Yeah. So he's saying
Hayam Eshed said it about Donald Trump. Yeah.
So I do wonder if, for one thing, you've got this massive bill, 5,500 pages plus, and someone has slipped this thing in about releasing all the information we have about UAPs into the public domain as part of the $2.3 trillion bill. There's $2.3 trillion appropriations bill. I mean, when you've got a bill that size, I mean, you think of something like in the UK, the Brexit bill. Boris Johnson negotiated a deal with the EU at the last minute, and it ran to hundreds of pages, and MPs had, was it a couple of hours to read it before they had to sign it? So you've got to build. Who's going to read 5,500 pages in detail? I mean, I know people pay. Well, you have to assume that this stuff is going to get read by someone. That
So you get 1,000 people, get them to read 5 pages each.
Yeah, that sort of things. They will have people whose job it was to read this thing, and presumably there are people who are paid to write this thing, and then people paid to read this thing, and somehow this section has been put in about they're going to release information about UAPs. All the intelligence gathered by the Office of Naval Intelligence, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, and the FBI. So all that information has got to be released. So I don't know if it's Trump. Maybe Trump put it in himself, and it's a bit of mischief making.
You're suggesting it's been snuck in. I don't believe that for one moment. I think it's a deliberate and conscious and open.
But why is it part of a?
Well, that's something we'll come to on next week.
Yeah, but that's why it doesn't seem to be anything to do.
Too far away from this week's.
It doesn't seem to be anything to do with what the bill's about. It's just something arbitrary that's been slung in, and that's what I think.
I think it's a case of, right, you're forcing me to pay out this money. Well, you need to give something back in return. You can tell them about this. Tell the public about this. I think it's a simple quid pro quo. But we'll come on to that next week, where we'll be discussing that COVID bill release of information in a lot of detail, I'm hoping. But yeah, so kind of to wrap up this increase in release of certainly video footage, of information, if it's not that, then what do you think is the objective?
It's hard to say, isn't it? You can only speculate. I do know people, and there was someone in my own family who believes that Donald Trump is the Messiah, and that this will prove that he has a host of angels in the form of extraterrestrial beings. He's in big trouble at the moment. It looks like the civil investigation into his affairs has turned into a criminal investigation. But if suddenly next week he can say, yes, I am the Messiah, and I've got this these advanced beings, these extraterrestrials, at my beck and call, and I'm taking over again.
Well, I've got to say this. He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. But there we go. But maybe we'll be proved wrong next week. Maybe. Who knows? But what do you think, listeners? Is the increase in UFO activity being formally released by the Pentagon. And a year ago when we started this podcast, I never thought I'd be saying this, but we're getting UFO information from official sources, and they're saying it's UFOs.
Yeah,
it's incredible. Why do you think it is, listeners? We really, really want to hear your thoughts on this. So do get in touch with us via the usual means. Facebook, Twitter, our links are in the description, and also in there, just as a reminder, on this week's episode you will get a link to our Twitch stream as well. 4 p.m. UK time next week, the 25th of June, or 10 a.m. Central time. Do your own conversions from there. I'm not going to give you a list of all the different time zones. But yeah, do join us on Twitch. You can get in the Twitch chat. You can post questions about the subject or about us in general, if you like, and we'll respond live on air on Twitch. I'm really excited for it, Neil.
Yeah, me too. Meeting our listeners for the first time. Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, we've done live Twitch. Well, I do a couple of Twitch live streams, usually about Star Trek, because I'm a bit of a nut on that as well.
Indeed.
We've done our Tales from the Twentyside live as well, haven't we?
We have.
On special occasions. But this will be something else. This will be something very, very special. I'm also really excited for the information that's going to come out about this release of information.
Yeah, I am too. I'm certainly very curious.
I'm really hoping there is an absolute smoking gun in there. I haven't used that phrase in a few weeks, so yeah. I'm really hoping for it. I suspect I might be disappointed, but
well, let's not set up our listeners for a big disappointment. But yes, there is some trepidation. Could this be all be a ruse to put this whole thing to bed once and for all and say, look, that's all UFOs are. It's just this thing. You know?
Do you know if there are final answers that are categoric and give us absolute closure on the subject, well, we'll have a very short podcast life.
No, we won't. No, we won't, because the next podcast will be about what is this cover up. Yeah. it will fuel us for another 50 episodes.
Yeah, you never know. So do join us next week. In the meantime, keep watching our Twitch channel and the information coming out from the Pentagon, and of course those skies. Take care for now.
Looking forward to meeting you next week. Bye bye.
Yes. Bye.
Aliens Explored is a Fecal Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter or Facebook by searching Aliens Explored, or visit us on aliensexplored.com.